I'd say the biggest concern or the biggest stress that I put on this is that it needs to be followed. First of all, you need to have one, to your point, but second of all, you need to follow it. And so anytime you're seeing someone piercing the veil, being able to touch the assets of some of the people behind the LLC, it's because they didn't follow the formalities. They didn't follow the operating agreement. They started to mix their personal finances with the LLC's finances. And so, you can be creative in what the operating agreement provides for, but you need to follow it. You need to, write it in such a way that it's intended to be followed and then follow it.
Welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Law Podcast. Jason Muth here with straightforward short-term rentals and pride-away stays. Rory, we have another attorney on, so you could play nicely in the sandbox. It's going to be a two-attorney, one non-attorney episode today.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to bouncing ideas off of our guest today because I know he's a wealth of information about different ways that people can own property. I know those are questions I get asked a lot, and sometimes every attorney has a little bit of a different nuance, so I'm excited to hear what he has to say about that.
They certainly do. And, when you're dealing with family law, and our guest is a family attorney, you have to focus on property issues every so often, especially in cases of divorce and, probate. Child custody also is involved, with a lot of work that our guest has done. And now he's doing some work with cybersecurity. And we certainly have asked AI questions on this podcast. So I'm curious to hear how he's weaving that into his practice. We are going to Chicago today for our guests, and please welcome Jonathan Steele. Jonathan, welcome to the Real Estate Law Podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So Rory obviously has a long list of questions as our other resident attorney on this, but, over the years, I guess I'll just kick it off with this. You've done a lot of work in the divorce category, and, with family law, lots of things come along with that, but how has real estate and property kind of woven into your everyday world in the law that you practice?
Divorce lawyers are sort of the black sheep of the lawyer field. We get a bad name, but we need to know basically every kind of law there is because we touch on every kind of law, whether it's corporate, whether it's real estate, tax, property, obviously, you name it. It all comes up in a typical family law case, sometimes even criminal law. And very often in a family law dispute, there's a need or at least a desire on one side or the other to relocate. And sometimes in the cases of abuse or in the cases of stalking, the relocation is the person that's wanting to move wants to move to somewhere that they don't want to be publicly discoverable. So they want to be able to hide where they're living, particularly when you're, dealing with orders of protection or stalking orders. It becomes very important to obfuscate your address to the best of your ability.
Yeah. Jonathan brings up a lot of serious points that go hand in hand with real estate because largely, in real estate, once you record a deed or record information, that information is going to be publicly accessible to anybody forever and ever. And there's really no way to take it back, at least not here in Massachusetts. But aside from the serious point, I've worked in a lot of transactions where we have divorcing sellers. And I don't practice family law, so I always kind of laugh when I have to work with divorce attorneys who are in a very different mindset than us. We're trying to, in a very collegial way, get the real estate transaction done. We're coming with our buyers to the closing table who are all excited, and then we have a very different mood with very different attorneys sitting across from us at the table. So that's always a treat. But I do want to dive right into something that you're also an expert on, and that is something of acute interest to our audience, and that is the different ways to own property. We get asked questions a lot about whether I should put a property into LLC, do I put it into a trust, and everything of the like. So we have a bunch of different ways that somebody can own property, and I'm looking at the different notes that we've taken before the podcast, and I see there's one form of ownership that's not mentioned on here that's conspicuously absent, and that is ownership in a corporation. Before we get into anything else, could you just tell us why we rarely hold real estate incorporations?
Well, I think it's more common to see them held in an LLC for whatever reason. I think it's a cleaner way of holding title to a piece of real estate. So, maybe it's just out of convention. I think, lawyers are creatures of habit, right? So we have the ways of doing things that are comfortable to us as lawyers and we know are tried and true. And so, when somebody comes to us and they want to take title to a property, we normally run through the ones that we've been accustomed to and that we know work well. And so maybe just out of practice or custom, we have a set toolbox, so to speak, of the ones we would recommend to people.
Okay. And then I'll jump right into the question that I guess get asked a lot, even by people who have never owned real estate before, and they're only starting to vaguely consider about purchasing their first investment property. And the first question is always, do I need to get an LLC? When should somebody really be asking that question? I'm always in the mindset that question is kind of a follow-up question, and it's not the most important question for somebody just starting out. But when should somebody get an LLC for their real estate holdings, and why should they do it?
The conventional way of taking title to property is just you buy it in your name, right? You take title, you hold it in your name. But as you touched on in the intro, the problem there is that it's pretty easily discovered. So you hop on Google, you type in someone's name, up pops their address, up pops their acquaintances, their contact information, courtesy of data brokers. That is just a growing problem. And you can go on the Recorder of Deeds website in your county where you're holding the title, and you can pull up the mortgage, and you can pull up just about everything related to the transaction. So there's a privacy element to taking title in an LLC. There's a certain level of liability protection that comes along with taking title in an LLC. It's not quite as robust as people tend to think that it is. It's not an absolute shield. It does require a certain distancing of, your personal financial matters from the LLC itself. And so, if you're going to be investing in real estate and you're going to have maybe another partner that's investing with you, an LLC can be a good way of taking title.
And just a couple, basic questions with that. How much of this is really state specific? If the work that you do in Illinois, how different is that going to be from work we do here in Massachusetts versus work that's done in Wyoming or Delaware?
Delaware tends to be a little bit more corporation friendly, but I think the basics of liability protection, the basics of sort of the tax advantages of owning title in an LLC, sort of the operational efficiency of being able to have multiple investors or partners without sort of complicated structuring, and maybe the estate planning benefits that can come along with it. I think that's going to be pretty universal. Some of the more nuanced land trusts might be state specific. Some of the specific liability protections or the formalities that are required to establish an LLC may be state specific, but the structure is going to be pretty similar, I think.
Okay. And we're talking about the structure and the agreements here. And one of the important things that I just want to get across and hear your take on are the importance of operating agreements. Just getting an LLC from your state secretary of state doesn't necessarily automatically set up all these benefits that you have. Particularly if you have multiple owners, you need to actually set up the LLC with purpose and set up that operating agreement. What goes into the discussion when you're meeting with multiple people for the operating agreement, and what are some pointers that people should be taking into consideration when they put together that agreement?
I'd say the biggest concern or the biggest stress that I put on this is that it needs to be followed. First of all, you need to have one, to your point, but second of all, you need to follow it. And so anytime you're seeing someone piercing the veil, being able to touch the assets of some of the people behind the LLC, it's because they didn't follow the formalities. They didn't follow the operating agreement. They started to mix their personal finances with the LLC's finances. And so, you can be creative in what the operating agreement provides for, but you need to follow it. You need to, write it in such a way that it's intended to be followed and then follow it.
And then you also talk about the privacy aspect of the LLC, but The first thing I can think of is that you can go on to the Secretary of State's website and look up every LLC and see who's behind the LLC, who the registered agent is, who the managers are, who, in many cases, the members are. How could somebody actually use an LLC to maintain some privacy over the transaction?
That part of it may be state specific as far as what you're able to discover on the Secretary of State's website. I know in Illinois, you can normally see the president of the LLC and you can see the registered agent. And so sometimes, you can name your attorney as your registered agent. And so they'll get, service of process, they'll get filings from the state. And so your attorney is the one that's discoverable on the Secretary of State's website, which then provides sort of a veil of anonymity to the members. So maybe in your state, it does list all of the members. Maybe the operating agreement is, you can download it. But at least in Illinois, it's sort of limited into what you can see.
So lately, you've been doing a lot of work with cybersecurity, and I'm starting to sense how that can connect with the work that you've done in family law and with real estate. I mean, Rory draws a point that you can look up any LLC and see the registered agent. You can look up property deeds very easily. I certainly have done that. He and I have looked up people's mortgage amounts sometimes. Like if we're offering on property, we want to, help tell the story. Or if we're just curious and nosy, you can kind of dig in and find this information online. What was it that made you want to investigate cybersecurity a little bit more, Jonathan, and weave it into your practice area?
Yeah, I've always had sort of a general interest in this area, but there's a ton of overlap in family law. So that, people come to me in a vulnerable state very early on in their divorce case, and they're pretty sure that their spouse has access to their data, their iMessages, their devices, their Nest cameras, you name it, right? So over the course of your marriage, you've shared a lot of access, and a lot of people come in and they look for guidance in how to untangle the digital part of their lives. And most divorce lawyers that I know, they just can't give that guidance. And so sometimes people come in and they're saying, my spouse somehow knows where I am all the time. Have they air tagged me? Am I driving around with a tile? How do they know where I am? And the conventional advice from divorce lawyers often, I don't know, go hire a private investigator and they'll do a sweep of your home looking for cameras or AirTag kind of devices. And that's the best that most family law lawyers can do for you because, the majority aren't trained in this area. So I saw there being some benefit in doing some formal training in cybersecurity and privacy. And so I went down that rabbit hole during COVID and have gotten a certification in cybersecurity. And that's how I landed in that.
What kind of feedback have you received from clients of yours that you have signed on or worked with since you received that certification and this interest in this category?
I wish that I could say that it's all been good. It's a mixed bag. So there's clients that appreciate it. The ones that know appreciate it. But there's some that are inconvenienced by, what I require to work with a client. So like I won't exchange emails with clients that have attachments. I'll only use like a secure upload portal where they have to click a link and it texts them a 6-digit PIN for them to download it. And so some clients, they don't like the friction. They're annoyed by it. It's just one extra step. It's just one extra link to click. And so they push back and they say, can't you just send me an attachment? Or why do I have to communicate with you through this type of messenger? And to those people, I say, there are other lawyers that won't require that of you, but there's a reason behind, or there's a method to the madness. So a lot of clients appreciate it. Some that are not knowledgeable on the subject appreciate the learning. And then there are some that just are irritated.
It's like that with any group of people who take clients on. There are these little tests all along the way. And they can be simple tests like, do you know how to email? Or like, will you follow this process that we have? And if the clients, want to divert from it too much early on in the engagement, it certainly shows that maybe that's not the right client for your company and you're not the right service provider for that person. So, maybe some of the knowledge that you gained allows you to vet the clients that you work with a little bit better and weed out some of the people that maybe don't want to adhere to the systems that you're putting into your business. I certainly know Rory tries to do that. It started long time ago when he first practiced law, and you were doing pro bono work and signing people on with small consultation fees. They didn't even want to pay those, and that was probably not the right client for you, right?
And we all use these different tools to improve our security and just to keep our clients better informed. But for some clients who just don't have basic technical literacy, it's very difficult to serve them, and it's difficult to kind of show your value proposition as an attorney to them if every time they receive just a general alert that some important date is coming up, it automatically triggers a phone call from them saying that I sent an email to their phone and they can't open it. What's going on? So there's some people that are just not good fits. And then to his point with transmitting secure information, I've had some friction with clients before, but amazingly, and this situation has gotten better, but amazingly, some lenders when I was doing real estate transactions just didn't want to abide by some of the basic security protocols too. That has gotten better, but I've encountered that too, which is kind of amazing to me, considering that real estate transactions have a private information jackpot.
That's concerning to me that the lenders aren't the ones that are insisting upon better security, better privacy. They got the deep pockets there, so I would hope that it would be them that would be pushing for this as opposed to pushing back.
In that situations, I have to think back a few years to think about the bad examples, but that has happened.
But it's also probably small local banks and credit unions or small lenders, that maybe haven't upgraded their systems to the point of the security of Citibank or Chase or Bank of America, Wells Fargo, some of the big ones. Not to say that they're all immune either. I mean, how many data breaches do we see from, the large lenders where suddenly we're getting emails saying that our credit might be impacted, here's a free credit report. But talking about technology, since we're on that tip, AI and automations are things that a lot of people are using in their businesses these days. Jonathan, have you found a way to work that into your practice area with some of your clients that you're working with, and what kind of feedback have you gotten?
I use AI daily. And I'm of the mindset that either you're going to learn how to use it or you're going to get left behind. And that seems to be working. So I use it in a variety of different ways. One of them is to write automation and then implement AI into the automation. So what I mean by that is I'll have a script that runs on a computer in my home on a daily basis that will go online. It will pull recent case law from the appellate court's website. It will use an AI engine to read the case, to brief the case, and to send me an email every morning with the case attached and with the brief of the case. And it keeps me informed of, cases that come down in real time. It allows me to disseminate them to the firm in real time. And it makes me look like a rock star because I would not be able to do that as quickly on a daily basis. Like our schedules just don't permit the ability to do that. So that's one area that I use it pretty frequently. I also use it to try to stay top of mind with clients, and it helps me to remember and automate the personal touch of it's your client's birthday, so reaching out to a client and wishing them a happy birthday, or it's their kid's birthday, or it's a milestone that's related to their divorce case, and over time you have maybe 50 to 100 clients in a year. Trying to remember all of that, even with calendar reminders, would be overwhelming. But with the advent of artificial intelligence and automation, it allows, doing that much easier, and leaning on AI to implement and write that automation is a huge time saver. As an attorney, who has time to learn how to write code? But AI does that for you. So.
And I mean, nothing in there here is, problematic with the use of AI. You're not exactly feeding tons of private client data into the AI bots just to generate responses. You're not relying on it to write your briefs for you and come up with case law just in case it fabricates some case law that's out there. But I'm glad to hear that you're using it. I attended a CLE just last month where there was a panel talking about AI and the use of law firms, and one of the panelists actually told us, if you want to be safe, just don't use it. Just don't use it. It's the safe way to go. And even in the moment, that felt quite wrong, because you're pointing out a lot of ways that we can use this to better inform us substantively, as you're using the script to discover new case law out there and alert you to it, and also ways to provide some good marketing and sales touches with our clients, ways that are, you're not relying it for the hard substance of the law, but you are making good use of it.
I think it's using it cautiously that's important there. It seems like people are either in one of two camps. They're either super anti-AI and they don't want to talk about it, they don't want to use it, they don't want to hear about it, or they're just jumping in to the deep end, both feet, and they don't really understand what they're doing. So they're just, dumping clients' bank statements into like a chat GPT and hoping for the best. And that type of endeavor, I think, is fraught with problems that are going to show up down the road. And certainly to your point about, writing briefs for you, chat GPT is going to spit out with great confidence case law that doesn't exist, and it'll tell you it exists and it doesn't, and people are finding themselves in some issues there because they're citing cases that don't exist. Here at least in Cook County, we're Chicago, a lot of the law division judges they have orders in place that acknowledge that people are going to use AI in their drafting, and they're implementing rules as far as how to cite to the model that you're using. So we're embracing it here. We know that it's coming. You can't push back against it. It's just about using it responsibly.
Just when you think we've all seen everything in our lives, which we clearly haven't. I mean, AI has really taken over these past few years. It's in the news. Everybody's using it. Schools are probably having to figure out how to make sure that people aren't just hitting a button and then submitting a report, which I'm sure is very tempting for high school and college students these days. But over these past few years also, like bringing it back to some real estate related topic I want to ask about, interest rates have just spiked and then come back down, but they were super low for a long time. It's affected real estate markets across the country, both in terms of buyers, sellers, inventory. Jonathan, have you seen anything different these past couple of years with the way the real estate market has behaved in relation to the family law that you've been working with? Maybe any new disputes that have popped up with some divorcing couples or some issues with any kind of title that maybe did not occur during the first, say, decade of your practice?
Not really with respect to interest rates. There's recent case law in the state that basically ties a court's hands about selling property during the pendency of a divorce case. And that's in the last 4 or 5 months. Up until now, a lot of judges would be pretty eager to list and sell a marital residence during the pendency of the case. And they did it under the guise of, this is sort of like temporary relief, and, you're going to split up eventually, so let's just, do it now. Let's rip the Band-Aid off. And the appellate court came down pretty hard saying there's nothing temporary about selling a residence. It can be pretty prejudicial to somebody's rights at the end of the case. And we're really only supposed to do it in exceptional circumstances. So when the home is in foreclosure, or, maybe it's sitting there vacant. So I've seen a move away from an eagerness to listing homes during a divorce, but I haven't seen a big swing that I can attribute to an interest rate move.
Before we get to our final questions, Rory, what are some thoughts you have with what you've heard from Jonathan today, both with family lawyer's practice, some of his cybersecurity, and anything else that has come up?
Thinking back to the kind of the different entities that we have, the ways that you can hold title to real estate, kind of going back to where I was talking earlier. We have regulations coming up this year, the beneficial ownership information filings that we now have to complete with the federal government that I'm concerned they're going to strip out some of the anonymity with LLCs. Are there any strategies you think if somebody really needed to maintain anonymity with their property? What's a good strategy that they can pursue? Is it still going the LLC route? Is it maybe combining LLC with a land trust? Like, what's the gold standard for protecting anonymity in real estate title?
I'd push people normally towards a land trust because, to your point earlier about, can you go on the Secretary of State's website and start to peel back the onion a little bit as far as who's the president, who's the agent, and do a little bit more, and maybe you can get access to the agreements that have been filed with the state. With a land trust, it's pretty tough. What you're going to see on the recorder's website is that land trust number 591276 owns title to this property. And most of the land trusts, at least where I practice, are held by Chicago Title and Trust. And so you can try to call up Chicago Title and Trust and peel back that onion, and you're going to get nowhere. And so, that's generally where I push people. I would consider that to be the gold standard as far as anonymity. It doesn't have all the same types of liability protections that may come with an LLC. It's not as good maybe for, investors or multiple partners, but it can be helpful in terms of the anonymity aspect, and that's where I generally push people.
Now, would that, hold up in case of litigation if in discovery they asked to, who the beneficiaries were of the trust? Would that hold up?
I don't think so. If you're getting sued, there's a way to get at the owner or the beneficiary. But short of litigation, it is going to give you that anonymity protection.
Thank you.
All right, Jonathan, why don't we ask the final couple questions we ask all our guests just to wrap things up and get to know you a little bit better, and then we'll love to find out how people can get a hold of you if they have more questions about anything we talked about in the episode. First question, if you could get on stage for half an hour and talk about any subject in the world with zero preparation, what do you think that would be?
Cybersecurity, privacy. I think, I can speak on that until I put people to sleep. So, I can do that with little to no preparation. Certainly anything in the realm of family law, but nowadays it's more cybersecurity.
My hunch is you could probably do the conference circuit, for people that are looking to learn about how the worlds of cybersecurity and law are intersecting, especially the CLE circuit, if that's what that's called in Illinois, because, I've never been to those events. Rory always comes home from them and they seem boring as sin, except there's always like one big theme each week or each month you do it. Second question we have for you, tell us something happened early in your life or career that impacts the way that you're working today.
That's a good question. Well, I guess I've seen a lot of horror stories and in the relationships that have dissolved over time. So I don't know that it impacts so much the way that I work, but it does impact the way that I function day to day, the way that I interact with my family, with my wife. You try to avoid and not emulate what you've seen in practice.
Do you know if there's an AirTag in your bag that your wife left?
I would hope that it would start to beep or give me an alert on my phone if that were the case, but I carry an AirTag on my keys that I share with my wife for the daily occurrence when my keys end up hidden compliments of my children.
I think I want to AirTag our daughter. They make these little these watch things that you can put an AirTag in. I'm sure she'd enjoy keeping that on. But Rory has me on Find My Friends and vice versa. I call it the stalker app. But actually, we don't mind it. The times that he'd be coming back from Boston or something back when you were driving down there, she would stare at the stalker app to watch the dot getting closer and closer to our dot. So there are some benefits to it, especially when you lose your headphones, right, Rory?
That is what happens mostly. I rarely lose my keys, but I lose my AirPods all the time.
Yes, you do. And the final question we have for you, tell us something that you're listening to or watching or reading these days.
I watch the same shows on repeat for decades at this point. I'm not very adventurous. When I come home at night, I want to turn my brain off. So I don't want to get into a new show where I have to focus. So I'm watching Sopranos.
Over and over?
over and over. It's on like its 25th anniversary at this point, and much to the chagrin of my wife, I watch that almost nightly.
Do you have a favorite character?
Tony, sure.
Of course. Yeah. We watched that during COVID. Of all times to have seen it, I'm from the New York area, right outside New Jersey, and I never saw Sopranos until a couple years ago. But it was pretty must watch once we started watching it.
That's okay. I think I've watched it enough for all three of us.
All right, perfect. Jonathan, we'll link up your website in the show notes. Is there any particular way that people can get a hold of you that you check the most?
Sure. Yeah, the website that I have, steelefamlaw.com, it's got all my contact information, all my various social media handles, and so that's going to be the best way to get a hold of me.
Right on. Rory, where can people get a hold of you?
You can find me through my law practice, Urban Village Legal. That's at urbanvillagelegal.com.
All right. And if you've enjoyed this episode, we love 5-star reviews, iTunes, Spotify, comments on YouTube, thumbs up on YouTube, all that great stuff. If you want to be a guest on the podcast, please go to realestate.podcast.com. You'll find a form there, fill it out, let us know who you are, and tell us why you want to be on the podcast. We'll see if it's worth discussing. Thank you for coming on the podcast, Jonathan. It's been a pleasure to get to know you and learn more about the work that you're doing in family law and how it intersects with cybersecurity and all the fun stuff we've talked about today. Rory, thank you for your expertise and for all the legal questions. Those are ones I could not have asked myself. I appreciate that. And thank you for listening or watching, if that's the case. We'll see you next time.